So before we jump in, one last thing is we StartupSac would like to recognize our sponsors, our corporate sponsors, without whose help we wouldn't be able to do this program or just about anything that we do. So just a quick shout out to Nivagen, SMUD, Weintraub Tobin, Witten Law, Moneta Ventures, TalentWeb, and Moss Adams. Thank you all. If any of you are on this call, thank you very much. We appreciate your support. Okay, I think we're at that section now where I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl, and she's going to give a description of the program, of FourthWave program, and then talk with Janine about her experiences, and then loop in Mariah at some point. And I'll leave it up to Cheryl to manage all that.
Great. Hey, thank you. Hey, Jeff, Laura, thank you so much for having us, and really appreciative of all you do for the startup community here in Sacramento. And Cameron, thank you for having us and being such a great partner with the Carlsen Center. We're really excited to have everybody here. Thanks to everybody for taking some time out for the happy hour tonight. And want to share a little bit about our upcoming 2020 FourthWave program that we're partnering with the Carlsen Center on. And then spend most of the time introducing you to two of our great mentors that are going to be participating in the program, Janine Yancey, CEO and founder of Emtrain, and Mariah Lichtenstern, who's the founder of the Diversity VC Fund that she's going to talk a little bit about, but really excited. So FourthWave and the Carlsen Center, we're a program for female identified technology entrepreneurs. What we've found, it's been well, kind of documented that women have led tech companies tend to struggle in scaling for two particular reasons, and that's access to mentorship and access to capital. For instance, on the capital side, it's well documented. In Q4 of 2019, only 2.8% of the venture dollars went to women-led technology companies. And so that's, a significant gap and obstacle to scaling. And so our mission is really to help fill that gap as we go forward. We're a nonprofit. Nancy Perlman, who's on here from LA, founded FourthWave in conjunction with her tech council position in Mayor Garcetti's office. And in 2017, brought it up to Sacramento, where myself and Tracy Seville, who's I think is on this call as well, co-founded the Sacramento FourthWave accelerator. And we ran our first cohort, and Janine will tell you a little bit about that. She was in the first cohort, and we just felt it had really positive success for the cohort and just building our community of women founders here in Sacramento. And so we were just pleased to have the Carlsen Center step up and partner with us so we could run it again in 2020. So just really quickly, and then we'll move into getting our mentors' perspectives, is so our target is to have 10 women participate in the program this year. Each will be provided with their own one-on-one business coach that will work with them throughout the 14-week period of the program to help them identify their own specific business gaps and that they need to be filled in order to scale to the next level. So we have a number of mentors, and we focus on getting appropriate sector and experienced mentors matched with each cohort member. We believe that leadership and culture is really the most important thing in helping scale a company. And so to that end, we've brought in leadership coaches that we've worked with for years that have a number of tools to help really the CEOs grow themselves personally, but then tools to help them scale cultural growth in their companies in kind of a win for all culture. And so we're lucky enough to have 6 of these leadership coaches. They've worked with the founders of Pinterest, Dropbox. They work with YPO. They've worked with Asana. So they're just amazingly experienced and talented. And each cohort member will get their own leadership coach that will work with them one-on-one throughout the 14 weeks. And then they'll also participate in group leadership curriculum as well as business curriculum. We've got well over 20 mentors, either in general mentorship or subject matter expert mentors that'll be working with the cohort throughout the 14-week period. And then we're going to end up the cohort the third week of November with Global Entrepreneurship Week at the Carlsen Center with an investor salon. We have built a network of what is called gender lens investors. These are investors who have a special focus on having a portfolio with women-led companies and a diverse portfolio. And so we'll have some of those investors. We're hopeful that perhaps we may be able to do some in-person by then, but if not, we're ready to go virtual. So we'll all be learning as we do that. We're accepting applications right now at fourthwave.io, and there's also a link from the Carlsen Center website. We're accepting applications through July 15th. So if you're a woman founder and you're interested, please apply. Or if you know of some women that should apply, please reach out to them. All right, so we're going to have Q&A afterwards. So I'm going to move ahead and go ahead and intro you to Janine Yancey. So Janine was part of our first FourthWave cohort and is going to be a mentor this year. She's the founder and CEO of Emtrain, which helps businesses transform their workplace culture through online training, content, and analytics. Emtrain has over 500 corporate customers, including names like Netflix, Chevron, the New York Times. They were named by TechCrunch as a top innovator for 2019. And Emtrain recently announced closing a $10 million investment round led by Education Growth Partners. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my friend, Janine Yancey.
Super. Thank you, Cheryl. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So I thought what might be kind of helpful for everyone is just to, talk through what I experienced, which frankly was kind of a pivotal, kind of evolution when I was in the FourthWave kind of cohort. Because when I connected with Cheryl and Tracy and Nancy, for me, I had been kind of slugging it out in the trenches, learning on my own for quite some time, and frankly, kind of exhausted. And it really, so, they say timing is everything. So I forgot how I connected with you guys. I think I might have done an application. I must have done an application. I don't know even how I found it. But it was just like, the stars and the moons were totally aligned because I was open to, in the crazy grind that is the day of every entrepreneur, kind of pausing and like building in some space so that I can have some kind of headspace to think about in a really intentional way, like how I wanted to get myself to the next level. And all of a sudden I found myself in this cohort with folks that had access to not only resources, but the biggest thing that I struggled with, and I think that it's a challenge for, I have to think, most entrepreneurs, is just having what I think of as the playbook, right? Like there is a playbook for everything. And as an entrepreneur, you don't have access to that playbook. And so you just find yourself, at least I did, just diving in. And I think there must be some commonality, like traits that are common traits amongst all entrepreneurs, because most people don't really want to build a business. Like it's kind of a unique thing. And so if you do want to build a business, chances are you're kind of unrealistic crazy. you're kind of a, workaholic. I mean, they're like, I think there's some things that you could probably point to that are some common traits that the most entrepreneurs have. And while those traits are your strengths, they can also be your weaknesses. And for me, they really were like my blockers, so my kind of inclination I'm a doer, right? So Cheryl, what is it? The Enneagram 8, I'm an 8, whatever that is. Like I'm just somebody who wants to, like, I see a problem, I'm just going to hop in and I'm going to fix it. And so that's great for building a business, but it can also be a blocker if you're not stopping, getting the playbook, getting the resources to help you do it in a smart, strategic way, as opposed to just like throwing all of your weight and kind of effort and energy at a problem. And that's really what I found myself doing until I, started aligning myself. And again, it was not just FourthWave, but that was the vehicle at that moment where just a few things kind of came into focus for me. And it kind of just put me on a better kind of path where I was way more intentional, and I just sought out the playbook, if you will. Like I was at a point where I'm like, I'm not going to learn this on my own anymore. I'm done with that. That's way too hard. There's somebody who has already figured this out in a related kind of application that I can just slightly tweak and have it apply to what I need it to apply to. Cheryl, is that too esoteric for you?
No, hey, thanks for sharing that. One thing I was just going to call out, Janine mentioned one of the leadership tools that it sounds like you've kind of internalized a little bit, which is the Enneagram, which really helps as a tool now being used pretty broadly in the Bay Area. I know tech companies and venture funds to really get a sense of your strengths and maybe some blind spots as a leader. And I know Janine just mentioned that was one of the key parts. And Janine, yes, you did apply, and you were so passionate when I will say that, with all of our final, applications, we do a, personal call, Zoom with everybody. Mm-hmm. And you were just so amazingly passionate about your purpose of, creating, organizations that are diverse and fair, and the way, your unique insight into doing that I actually think we were just all so, in awe of you after that, that interview. So yeah, you probably don't remember it, but I know Tracy and Nancy and I remember it well. So anyway, yeah, you I don't know if you want to share a little bit. We've had some people ask about the time commitment with FourthWave. So maybe if you can remember, I think you made a ton of progress on your business, and I don't think you.
Oh, yeah. It's huge. It's huge. So let me kind of track that, because I think that is helpful. So that was the fall of 2017. I was just telling folks in our private smaller breakout room, and I'll kind of share this too. So I had this was all part and parcel at the same time. So I think I'd gotten to the point where I was kind of digging in. I wanted to get the business to the next level. I had actually taken a pass. Lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning, they had made an offer for us the year before, in 2016. And they basically just wanted this static harassment course, and it was going to be kind of a marketing loss leader for their enterprise sales. And, I am super passionate about what we're trying to build. So even though, the money would have been nice, it was not aligned with what we were trying to build here at Emtrain. So we took a pass on that. And I think that was part, everything has a few components, right, that makes up kind of the moment at hand. And so taking a pass in 2016 to an exit was part of the dynamic. So by the time I got to 2017, I'm exhausted, but I'm still kind of focused that I'm going to build what I want to build. And kind of frustrated that I wasn't making the type of progress that I'd wanted to. So then I kind of connected with FourthWave. And at the same time, I was able to connect with a debt capital provider. So that is an option for people. And I connected with a nice group of people, but it's expensive. So I borrowed 2.4 and I paid back 3.5. That's, if anyone doesn't want to be an entrepreneur, that's actually a nice line of business to be in. It's just to be a debt capital provider. It's a very nice rate of return. They were happy campers when I paid them back. So, you know, kind of a few things came together where I had some, yes, true, non-dilutive. Yes. Do we get a comment from Mariah? Yes, it was non-dilutive, which was, very important because for me, because, you know, I came from a law firm background, so I didn't know business at all because lawyers are not really business people. So I just had a long kind of learning path. And I think if I had had equity investors in the business, it would have just kind of been our demise. You know, they would have just kind of forced a sale, because I think I was on a long path. So I think it was, for me, it was a good thing that I bootstrapped this business for over a decade, frankly. And then got to the point where all of a sudden I kind of had a clarity of what I needed to do, where I wanted to go, had some capital, met FourthWave, got surrounded by like-minded individuals and mentors and resources, and it all kind of came together, you know, at the fall part of 2017 in terms of a time commitment. I mean, I remember meetings and some dinners, but it was all fun. I mean, it was fun and it was kind of energizing because you're around people that are all, you know, struggling and trying to solve the same problems. So in that sense, it's really kind of motivating and energizing. So I don't think the time commitment is really the big thing. To me, the big thing is, and this comes from internal, you really need to get to a point where you are creating space and saying, okay, that little blog post, it's really secondary. Like, it's like working hard is gonna, like, when at the very beginning, working hard is gonna get you from nothing to like something. Once you're at something, working hard is not gonna get you to the next level. You gotta work smart, not work hard. And if, in fact, if anything, and especially I think women who are already kind of multitasking and they're juggling a bunch of stuff, we're kind of wired to work hard. It's kind of the bane of our existence, frankly, because it's our go-to, and it actually runs you into a rabbit hole. It doesn't get you to where you need to go. So like the big critical piece of doing something like FourthWave is actually very intentionally slowing yourself way down and saying, okay, I'm going to just build some space, some clarity of thought so that I can be strategic about how I'm spending my time. I mean, it sounds super simple, but I would say before 2017, I didn't really think about my schedule in terms of, all right, I only have, 40 hours in my week. How am I going to use those 40 hours to best move this business forward? Like, just a simple question like that makes sure, ensures that you're going to optimize for the most strategic things possible. So just building in some structure and some questions you ask yourself so that you are working on the things that are going to advance your business, and being in an incubator with people who, it's all just experience. They've been around the block a jillion times. You start to see the same, the same issues over and over again. Where, you will have folks that don't want, it's actually, I'll speak for myself, it's actually painful for me to see an entrepreneur make the mistakes I've made. Like, it's such an ouchie. I mean, I had a conversation, this was a call last week. One of my advisors had this woman reach out to me And we had an hour and a half call just because she was starting her business. And I'm like, I can't have you make the same mistakes I made. Please just don't. So that's, to me, kind of the big value of doing a program like FourthWave.
You know, Janine, I was going to just reflect as you were talking. I remember one of the key areas that we worked on was just on filling some gaps in your team during the FourthWave period. Mm-hmm. I remember you brought on a new head of product.
Yeah, that
really shifted your company, I think, kind of to the next level. Yeah, maybe share a little bit about that if you would like.
Yeah, so just for context, you know, Emtrain is a platform with online education, guidance, and analytics on what we call the tricky culture issues, which, you know, not luckily, but, you know, we're sitting in the middle of kind of a zeitgeist, if you will, of tricky culture issues as a society right now. So it's nice timing for us. But this was a vision that I have had for a long time, and we just were not staffed or organized to support building out this vision. And so, you know, I ultimately took a huge leap of faith. So it's kind of the chicken or the egg. I didn't have the team to get me to the next level, but then I didn't have the resources to hire the team. And I finally kind of took a big leap of faith and took out this debt capital. And the debt capital was to hire our chief product officer and our VP of engineering and our head of design. I mean, like those three roles, there you go. But it put us on a different trajectory. You know, so you hear the phrase, it's all about the team. And it's just, even as I say, it seems so cliche, but it's all about the team. It is all about the team. And I'd say it's also getting the right people on the right seats on the bus.
Yeah. And so I recall during that 2017 period, that was a big, you know, transition for you. And, you know, you got some amazing, you know, people on board with you.
Yeah. And that, so if knowing now, with what I know right now, I think, and what I'm trying to do moving forward is really intentionally tap into different peer networks, right? Because that wasn't really part of my thought process. I was just looking for, okay, does this person have, you know, the top skills and experience to fill this role? I think along with that is another cycle of thought process of like, okay, so, you know, what is this person's, you know, like peer networks? Because that's where you can, in a really intentional way, build and drive diversity within your team.
Great. Okay. Well, do you want to share anything about, obviously, I think people want to hear a little bit about your fundraise, maybe share a little bit about that. And then I want to introduce Mariah.
Okay, certainly. So like I said, we did a debt capital transaction in 2017. Went back to that firm in the beginning of 2019 for a little bit of an expanded capital, and then spent kind of the back half of 2019 looking for an equity investor, because at that point we had built our brand new platform. It was leveraging machine learning and predictive analytics, and we had launched it at Workday and at Cisco, and we were getting really good results. So we kind of felt like, okay, we proved product market fit. We proved that the market is ready for this. And so we spent, you know, this back half of 2019 looking for a good capital partner. And luckily, so I'll just kind of tell you kind of our path, and I'll kind of give you lessons learned. So luckily, we're able to meet education growth partners through a connection of my product officers. And they were just the right partner for us. Their whole focus is education and workforce development. So we were like right in their wheelhouse. And because we were right in their wheelhouse, you know, everything just kind of aligned. Like the valuation, the offer that they gave us, you know, was supportive of where we needed it to be. Their interactions, their help, their support, like everything is really synergistic. Having them, I've got a board meeting this Thursday. Having our investor Peter on the board is actually additive, and I look forward to talking to him. It's not you know, a complication or a burden at all. I seek out his advice. So it's been great. I think it's also a nice kind of pivot moment because, and this might be kind of a cop out, but I'll just be transparent in this safe zone. So it's not me now. It's all because of the board. So everyone has to like map to a certain level of excellence, not because it's mean old Janine saying, you got to do this, you got to do this. It's because, oh, no, it's board. So it actually presents a really nice foil for me because they've become kind of like, you know, my bad cop, if you will. I think he'd be bummed if they all, I mean, we've got several board members, but anyways, it's become quite useful. So it's been a nice kind of, you know, kind of rudder, if you will. Lessons learned though. I remember talking to this one super successful entrepreneur. He had sold a couple companies. He was on company number 4 and he had all these exits. The guy was, you know, quite well-to-do, and his recent company had been funded by Microsoft. And I met him through a friend of a friend of a friend. You just kind of can't be afraid to just, you know, put yourself out there. And I was getting demoralized because of the fundraise, and I was not finding, you know, the right partner. I had a couple offers that I didn't like, and so on and so forth. And he's like, stop your whining. I'm like, excuse me. He's like, how many people have you reached out to? And I had my little like spreadsheet. I'm like, 20? And that was kind of a stretch, frankly. It's closer to like 17 and 18. He's like, okay, so just like you think about like cold calls, and not that this is the land of cold calls anymore, but you know, historically cold calls, you do 80 cold calls a day, you know, and out of 80, you'll get maybe 2 connects. Because fundraising is no different than that. You come back and whine to me when you've talked to 100 people. Because that's what I did. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's just helpful for expectations because I didn't have that understanding. And so when I had been through a number of lunch meetings and coffee meetings and so on and so forth, I was like, oh, this is kind of a drag. But it is what it is.
Well, you know, I think you said something really important, Janine, which is you found the right fit for an investor.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's that is so important, is you're, you know, finding the fit, and then timing comes into it too. Timing for you and timing for the investor. Because sometimes you can be a fit, but the timing is off.
Oh, and so to that point, let me just kind of emphasize that we met our investor like in the fall, and we're talking in the winter, and then we're in due diligence. Like by January, we're in due diligence. I know it's extended because this is an old business and it's got legacy stuff, and so there's a lot to look through. March 15th, stock market fell huge. We're in due diligence, and our lawyers are Gunderson Detmer down in Palo Alto. You know, they're at $900 an hour. And so I'm looking at the stock market, and I reached out to the investor. I go, can we just call this? Because if this is not going to happen, I actually don't want to pay the lawyers anymore. I'm kind of done. Like, being a former lawyer who bills by the hour, I know I need to call off the dogs because I really don't want to be paying their bill. And that was actually cool because he said, we're going to do it. He goes, oh, you're going to do it? He goes, yeah, we're going to do it. I'm like, okay then. So we actually closed Friday, March 20th, at possibly the worst time ever. But that's a reflection that it was a good fit between them and us, and the timing in many ways was good, even though it was COVID.
Yep. Great story. You'll be telling that story when you have your big exit, I think. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks so much, and hang around for Q&A because I'm sure there's going to be a lot for you. So I want to introduce, and as I said, Janine's a mentor for our upcoming 2020 cohort, and I want to now introduce Mariah Lichtenstern, who's also going to be one of our mentors for our 2020 cohort. Mariah is the managing director of Founders Institute Sacramento, advisor to the Cal Seed Clean Tech Fund and Berkeley Skydeck. She is a fellow with the Aspen Institute, and she's founder of Diversity Ventures, a seed fund here in Sacramento. And I wanted to invite her here today to tell you about, I heard about the fund this week on a call with the Founders Institute with their VC lab. And I was so excited about what she's going to be bringing to Sacramento that I really wanted her to share that with all of you. And I'm so excited to have her as part of FourthWave this year. So Mariah, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I just want to, take a moment to really express first of all, to say I am excited to be here. I am truly excited to be here. A lot of us are getting pulled in a lot of directions right now. But I see familiar faces. There's, some new faces here. And this is exciting to me to see what's happening in Sacramento, especially where I live and consider myself invested. I also just want to express gratitude to Startup Sacramento, to FourthWave, to the Carlsen Center for making this space for founders and for people like myself who are trying to build ecosystems and to make a difference and seize upon the zeitgeist of this time. So just first of all, I wanted to say that. I also want to say, Janine, so much of what you said just resonated so deeply to me as a serial entrepreneur, as a woman, as a advisor to multiple entrepreneurs who struggle with all the things that you mentioned in your testimony. And that's part of why I consider it such a privilege and a huge opportunity to be part of FourthWave, and so powerful that FourthWave is here in Sacramento and launching this new cohort. I want to give a little bit of history. I don't know if Nancy remembers this, but the way that I first learned about FourthWave was actually in LA. So, in my vintage, I'm not going to tell on myself too much, but there was no Founder Institute in Sacramento. When my first entrepreneurial venture, there was no Y Combinator. There was no Techstars. There was no Founder Institute anywhere. There was none of that. But when I re-entered into tech, one of the first organizations I actually tapped into was FourthWave in Los Angeles. And I drove from Sacramento to Los Angeles for a panel that had Susie Rue and a couple of others. And good thing I can't remember the name of one of the other speakers because I would name and shame him for what he said that day. But, we're all learning. And I think that's something that, especially in this particular time when we have the social unrest, it's important to remember and to give each other grace, to recognize that we're all learning. Whether it's, I say this sometimes jokingly, but it's 100% true. I thought that my mom's generation burnt their bras so I wouldn't have to deal with sexual harassment and stuff. Right? I thought that, my dad was a Black Panther and worked with the Brown Berets, and MLK did his thing and Malcolm X did his thing, so that I would be good to go on my merits, But the fact of the matter is that we still have a lot of work to do. And so, again, I just want to appreciate the role that FourthWave is playing in the organization like the Carlsen Center, under wonderful leadership with Cameron, are doing to, help make that path a little bit smoother, because I wish I'd known, some of this wisdom and that I'd been able to tap into that when I was, you know, an undergrad at UC Berkeley launching my first company. And I mentioned to a founder I spoke with yesterday, one of my favorite founders in the ecosystem, about the cash flow quadrant, which is really my kind of introduction to entrepreneurship. I knew that there was businesses out there that employed people, but I never really thought of entrepreneurship as a pathway. I just had no models of that, had no examples of that. And cash flow quadrant, it breaks it down in a very interesting way. And I want to tie this into something Janine said. If you look on the cover of the book or the game or anything like that, there's you know, the left quadrant and the right quadrant. I hope I'm doing this the right way for the audience to see. But on the left side is E and S, and the E is for employee, where you work for your income, right? And then the S is self-employed, and that might be, you know, a doctor or lawyer or a small business owner, right? Where, you know, again, you're working for yourself, so you have more autonomy and control over your schedule. You're probably working overtime, right? But then on the right side of the quadrant, you have B and I, and the B is business owner and the I is investor. And the thing that really distinguishes the B from the S is that if you're a business owner, you can walk away from your business, you can go eat, pray, love, or whatever you need to do. You can get hit by a truck or whatever the case may be, and your business still runs. And so to the point that Janine made earlier about, you know, making space to be able to work smart, to recalibrate, to think about how can I level up to go to the next level? I mean, we all should be doing that throughout our lives, because our time is finite. And so we do want to be smart and strategic. And it's, you know, something I grapple with, certainly, especially in times like this, where every day I'm getting a DEI, diversity and inclusion, you know, type of, you know, phone call. And I happen to have the minors, and I've done a lot of the work, and people want the cliff notes. And at least I can do is, you know, lead people down which rabbit hole to fall into to get it together. But, you know, in times like this, we really have to be strategic and prioritize where we allocate our time. And so I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate Janine's testimony for that. And some of the, also what she mentioned about network. And that's part of the role that I'm playing, not only with Diversity Ventures, but with the Aspen Tech Policy Hub Fellowship, because I want the founders out here that are listening to be encouraged and to know that there are people who do understand that the dynamics are different according to your network. As women, the dynamics are different. And a lot of times when you're pitching Sand Hill Road, they don't understand that. They just don't have the lived experience. And at the same time, you know, we also need to acknowledge that, you know, those lived experiences, like, you know, the VC that told Janine, you got to make those 100 calls, you know, that's a conversion ratio, right? Like even if you're doing advertisements, you're going to expect like a 2% conversion ratio. So if you haven't made the 100 calls, don't expect to have one or two, you know, people buy in, right? And so there's things that we can learn from each other, but it really does need to go both ways. But there is a different experience. There's different mindsets and even self-limiting beliefs that women tend to have, and people from different intersectionalities tend to have. And that's something that, you know, I'm excited that FourthWave is addressing, both with things like the Enneagram I mentioned there. I'm a 1 with the 2 wing, which was enlightening for me to even know myself, you know, let alone how to interact with others. And I'm still learning, but just to know yourself, who you are, and how to position yourself to succeed. You know, in Founder Institute, we do Founder DNA, just to like help people understand what levers they can optimize. And I think that goes back into the team building. So I want to give just a brief introduction of Diversity Ventures and what we're doing, but I'll talk about that more tomorrow. So if any are joining for the Carlsen Center event tomorrow night, I'll go into a little more depth about like, what are we looking for, and, you know, just things to know, and some perspectives to harness as you're, you know, venturing into entrepreneurship. But essentially, Diversity Ventures is actually a management company. And what I try to do is give founders the insight that I wish that I'd had as a founder when it comes to VC. So, you know, I like to kind of explain a little bit how venture capital works. You know, so essentially you have a management company, and that's what Diversity Ventures is. And management companies manage funds. And so a venture capitalist job is to go out and raise funds just the way that, you know, many of you as entrepreneurs are raising funds. You know, we have to go and raise funds from limited partners. And then we deploy those funds into companies that we believe will help us generate an acceptable return on our fund, such that we'll be able to go and raise more funds and keep deploying capital. And so it's important to understand that perspective and to keep that in mind when you're going out and pitching, what kind of fund are you dealing with? Where are they at in the cycle? And there's some heuristics out there that I would challenge, like there's heuristics like don't talk to associates. Well, I believe, talk to associates because they're going to move up the chain and you don't know where they're going to land, but just recognize, what you're dealing with when you're dealing with associates, because they might just be doing diligence on another company that you're a competitor to. Or, so be aware of what the roles are and become a student of who you're selling to, because if you're raising capital, you're selling your business to a VC to invest in. So diversity ventures, our thesis is impact oriented. So what we look for is companies that have positive social, economic, and or environmental impact and high potential for outsized returns. And what does that mean? Every single company that I look at for investment consideration, I must believe that if I invest in that company, they have the potential, the ability, the likelihood. I have to convince myself this company is going to give me a 25x return or more. That's what I'm looking for in my mind. And even knowing that, half of the companies will fail. Just because those are the numbers, and that's the risk that we take. But that doesn't mean I'm like, well, you might fail, but I like you, so I'm just gonna go ahead and write this check. No, every single one has to have the potential for outsized returns. And so knowing it's great to have a great idea, that's important. And it's great if it's impact oriented, because that's what I look at. But it's equally important that the business model makes sense, right? That there is especially now, because again, going back to limited partners who invest in general partners, there's things that they're looking for, right? And there's, just like, I don't know if all of you are geek out on this stuff as much as I do, but if you're following the trends, like with IPOs, and there's kind of like overvaluation of certain companies that IPO, and then when the stocks, go down, it's the public market that pays for it, right? And so that because the valuations are different in the private market than in the public market, there's this whole thing about, companies being overvalued. So LPs don't want that kind of reputation in private equity. So, they want more transparency that these companies are not just growth companies, these companies are revenue generating companies. So right now it's very important that you can show where you're going to get to profitability, how you're going to go to market, how big is that market, what is the formula that can translate to revenue. So those are just some things about what we do, what we're looking for. And yes, right now I'm actually, much like those of you who have gone through an accelerator or are looking at FourthWave, I just went through Founder Institute's VC lab, and we just did our demo day. And right now I'm working on a $5 million impact fund and another affordable housing fund, which doesn't apply to you all, but is a relevant issue in these times. And yeah, it's a much the same process as entrepreneurship. So I think it's really important as entrepreneurs to be mindful of both sides of the table, and it will serve you well throughout the life cycle of your company. So with that, that's a little bit about what we do, and I'm happy to talk about other things, but and also leave room for questions if anyone has any.
Hey, Mariah, thank you so much. I'm so excited about your fund. It's going to be a big game changer here in Sacramento. I was at her demo day and was blown away. And it's so excited that, we're going to have some women making investment decisions, here in Sacramento. And that's a really great fit for FourthWave. And I do know you have ambitions to take it then beyond Sacramento. So we can get you off the ground here with all of our great entrepreneurs, and then watch you scale it nationally. That I think that would be something to be really proud of for the Sacramento community going forward, and really, really excited to have you partner with us this year for sure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Cheryl.
Okay, so Cameron, do we want to or Jeff, do we want to do some questions? Because I'm sure there are quite a few.
Sure. I think it's time. Cameron, have you got anything else you wanted?
No, I was just it looked like Laura already had a question, but maybe you want to tell everyone how to raise their hand if they don't know how. we can do it that way.
Okay, anybody here who doesn't know how to virtually raise their hand at Zoom, please virtually raise your hand. Okay, that was bad. So we have two participants with raised hands already. So Laura, would you like to moderate the hand raising? I see Carolyn and then Mariah would like have hands raised.
That was a joke.
Oh, you followed up on that. Awesome. I love it.
Let me unmute myself. Mariah, I'm going to ask just a quick question. Is your fund specifically going to be for Sacramento region or Northern California startups, or is it have a larger geographic region area?
So great question. There is a double entendre in the name Diversity Ventures. Sacramento is the fourth most culturally diverse city in the nation. And so I feel like this is a great ecosystem to launch in. And obviously, you know, someone who's, you know, with between Founder Institute and the other affiliations here locally, I'm definitely giving first look to Sacramento. I live here, and I think there's a lot of great benefits to launching a company in Sacramento. I'm also an ambassador for the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. So even, you know, in the work I do outside of Sacramento, I'm like, Sacramento, great place to extend your runway. So I definitely would like to encourage companies to come to Sacramento, but also I think it's really important that we support homegrown companies in Sacramento. So I absolutely am, you know, I'm giving first look into Sacramento. I look beyond Sacramento. As I mentioned, I advise other organizations as well. And, you know, as Cheryl mentioned, you know, as I was mentioning before, you know, Diversity Ventures, this is not just like a one fun pony, you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of opportunity even for specific geographic focus or specific domain focus. I mentioned like the affordable housing. So, you know, I hope that's not like evading the question, but yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at Sacramento very closely. The most important thing to me is does a company have, you know, does it fit our thesis? And does it have high potential for outsized returns? Number one focus.
Okay, great. So Carolyn Peer has the next question.
Oh, great. Thank you. My question is actually for you, Janine. Hi. Good to see you virtually again.
Yeah, thank you.
My question is, what was different for you between the choice you made the first time to take on venture debt and the second time for venture equity? And I know you said you were like, you kind of felt like you had gotten to product market fit and you were ready to really ramp up, but was it, I mean, it seems like maybe that was the case even before then, or maybe I misread what you were talking about.
So it was actually an evolution. I mean, you know, this whole journey has been kind of an evolution from one phase to another. And so, you know, the point where we were ready and actually attractive to even a venture debt firm was, all right, we had actually gotten our act together. I mean, it sounds kind of silly now, but we were not, it took us a while to like, okay, recurring revenue, what a concept. and like, just to really break it down to like the specifics, it's like specific start dates and stop dates, you know, so we've got annual license agreements that are just subscription based, right? And I literally didn't have the team and my own kind of abilities to configure our agreements so that they were very definitive start dates and stop dates so that you can run a query and say, okay, in March, this is going to be your MRR. Like I wasn't there
Okay.
yet. So it was just really kind of inflection points. And so that first point was, all right, we kind of learned how to walk. We were ready for that.
Right.
Certainly no equity investor would have looked at us. I mean, like, I wouldn't have looked at us. What I know now, I would not have looked at us.
Okay. That's, yeah, I mean, I don't know your business, of course, but it always seemed to me like you always had all your ducks in a row, even before the venture equity. And I mean, we all hear about, you know, companies that get funded, I think that had much less than what you had at that point. So, I mean, that's why I asked the question, but it sounds like
Well,
Sounds like it was more like dotting the I's and crossing the T's, sort of.
more than that, I mean, and let me just speak candidly, because we actually had our fireside chat this morning with our expert Nancy Duyan on Black Lives Matter. So I am all hanging out there and super vulnerable today. So let me just kind of call it. I mean, you know, unless you have total relationships as a woman entrepreneur, you better have a shitload of money already producing, and you better look great before someone's going to take a chance on you. Because they're just not otherwise.
Right.
Just be honest with yourself. You know, the male investors are not going to have a clue as to what you're doing. They're not going to have any emotional kind of reaction to what you're doing, usually, because usually women pick ideas that speak to them, because that's how you kind of get motivated. You know, and so I'm sure I saw the worst of it, because I'm online education, guidance, and analytics on, what do you know? Bias, harassment, ethics. I don't really think Silicon Valley cares about those things very much. So me trying to talk to those folks, they were like, yeah. So,
Okay.
sorry if that's a little too.
No, I kind of suspected, and I appreciate your candid honesty. Yeah. Thank
Okay,
you. Thanks, Jane.
let's go to the next
Can I
question.
jump in on that as well?
Sure.
LinkedIn actually did a survey, and it's a couple of years old. I'll try to go back and dig through some posts to share in the chat for you guys. I've also been on a lot of these calls, Janine. So, you know, there's a lot of claims about caring now, and the attention is kind of on Black Lives Matter. But there's this LinkedIn study that they did on diversity, and they went and surveyed Sand Hill Road VCs, and 40% said that they felt that diversity was talked about too much in the media. So, you know, what you were talking about, Janine, in terms of like, you know, resonating with people who are making these decisions, there's a cognitive dissonance already when a woman walks in the room, or someone who doesn't like pattern match, which is
Right.
a whole nother discussion. But if there's already an aversion to talking about diversity, subconsciously in the lizard brain, you know, when a woman walks in the room, or someone who's not the usual suspect, it triggers an aversion. You know, so unless someone, there's indicators, there's tons of studies out there. There's Harvard bias studies, and this is true even with women. And, you know, Cheryl and I were talking about this. Women who are in VC roles, this is not true of angel investors. Female angel investors actually care a lot more about gender, but female VCs tend to conform to the status quo to protect their position. And so when you look at the rates of like people of color who receive investment compared to the decision makers who are people of color, when you look at the same metrics around women, women are not investing in other women at the rate of their representation. And so that says something, you know, in terms of conforming to the status quo. And, you know, so yes, and also Janine earlier talked about it taking, you know, 10 years of bootstrapping. And the other thing that women have to, or I won't say have to, but should consider, is that the path for women is often different, because we hear a lot in Silicon Valley that, you know, you're supposed to start a company in your dorm room with your with your roommate, and that is, you know, when it comes to statistics, that is not where the most successful companies come from. The most successful companies are started by people in their 40s and, you know, late 30s and 40s and beyond, who have domain experience. That's where the most success is. But I think part of, you know, this heuristic around investing in young people is being able to tap into a serial entrepreneur early, you know, and things like that. I think there's different reasons for that. But, you know, and I think a lot of it is also just barriers, because I give this example having a Hollywood background. One of the other participants today I know has a media and entertainment background. But, you know, I went to grad school for motion picture producing, and there's this interesting statistic that the most profitable films are family-oriented films. But the films that get the most investment and the films that are most often made are R-rated films. Why is that? Because the decision makers want to make those films. They don't want to make family films. It doesn't matter if they have a family, you know, Someone else will make those films. They want to make the films that their friends are going to think are cool. And that is just what it is. And the things that we have experienced as women, as people of color, the intersectionality, these are not happenstance. These things are not our fault. Okay, these are systemic things that have been put in place to keep us oppressed. There's a reason why until the 80s, before NABO, a female business owner had to have a male co-signer. In the 80s, that was the law. Okay, I mean, we barely got 100 years of the vote. Why is that? Because they know that women care more about the things that not everybody, you know, because even our governor's first partner has done documentaries on toxic masculinity and how men are also victims of this, right? They're not able to have the quality of life that they want and deserve because of these paradigms, but they are put in place to keep economic power in the hands of a minority. So I think it's just important to understand that and to throw that out there, and to also just give that reassurance and encouragement that this is not your fault. It's our responsibility and that we're able to respond. But, you know, I think it's really important to have the mindset that's like, put on your what do they call it? The pussycat hats or whatever, you know, throw up the fist, whatever it takes to get into that mindset of, you know, this is not our fault, but we're damn skippy gonna demand change.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Mariah. So, Kayleen, it's your turn to ask a question.
Yeah, hi. I just had a quick question for Cheryl. What are you looking for? Any particular stage of company for the FourthWave, or is it pretty open?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. So, you know, the program is really designed, as Janine said, for women who've gotten their company to a certain level, and then, you know, they just need some help, some mentorship, community to really take them to the next level. And that could be different for, you know, different women. We had a professor from the UC Davis who, taking it to the next level for her, was getting some grant funding to do animal trials, right? But she didn't have the, you know, some of the business mentorship enabled to do that, to be able to get that funding. And so it's really, you know, having some traction in terms of either revenue, product developed, customers, IP. So we're not really designed for, you know, I have an idea and I really need help to get started on that. And Cameron and, you know, there's plenty of programs through Carlsen Center and other places, you know, to help with that stage. So we're really looking, you know, for having a company, having some level of traction. And if you're not sure, ask us, because we have traction loosely. Like I said, we had, you know, somebody who had IP, but no revenue, no product, you know, where we had others like Janine who had, you know, she was basically just profitable and had been going for a long time, but had the sense that I really need help to go to what I think is the next level. So does that answer your question?
Sure. Yes, it
Great.
does.
Okay, super.
Okay. Barb, I'm going to go ahead and have you ask your question.
Okay, great. I was volunteering to wait and do it on the back end just to give more time. But so my question is, Mariah, when you look at a $5 million fund, what is the time frame you expect those returns to happen within? So most investors have a 4 to 5 year time frame, 5 to 7, whatever. And then also, how many companies do you think you can invest in with that size fund?
I'm glad you asked that. Thank you very much. And again, I'll maybe be able to go into a little more depth tomorrow in the conversation. But okay, so your first question is timeline. So typically a fund like a venture capital fund will be a 10-year fund, and it depends on you know, where you are in that fund. So with this particular fund, also 10-year fund, some companies tend to be going a little bit beyond that, but there's also secondaries, which are basically alternatives to IPOs for exits. that are, kind of emerging, but typically a fund will deploy for a number of years. A 5-year deployment term is typical. And from that point to the end of the term, a 10-year term, for example, the objective is exit. So that's why when Janine mentioned earlier that if she had taken equity instead of doing the non-dilutive capital, she would have probably been pushed, forced to exit. And those are considerations to make, and whether venture capital is right for you. I don't recommend that anybody take venture capital if they're not ready for it. And that's just a very candid conversation that I'm willing to have. So I hope that answers the first question.
Yep.
In terms of the second question, there is very, very specific metrics, because just like any other entrepreneur, we have a revenue model, we have a business plan that we adhere to. So for a $5 million fund, you would expect smaller check sizes, right? So for us, for this particular fund, the expected check size is $50,000 to $100,000. So we're talking about primarily pre-seed investments there. And so for a $5 million fund, here's the breakdown for that particular model. Approximately 20 investments between 50 and 100,000. The majority would be 50, right? So these are early bets, but also, again, bets that we think are going to have outsized returns. And then a small number of seed size, maybe 4 seed size investments. And there's a little wiggle room, but not that much. We also have a 20% reserve for follow-on. So if it's a $50,000 or $100,000 investment, then a follow-on is probably going to be the seed stage follow-on, right? So that might be, a 250,000 plus or minus, maybe up to $1 million. And so basically for our thesis, we're looking at 24 companies, and about 20% of them would have a follow-on.
Great.
So it's pretty formulaic.
Yeah, and that's super helpful. One of the things we do at FourthWave that is one of the things that's been most helpful to me as an entrepreneur is having our entrepreneurs work on an investment landscape so that they can look at all of the investment possibilities that are both dilutive and non-dilutive and create their own roadmap. And so looking at a $5 million fund with that kind of metrics is so helpful. I know for me, and I'm sure for other entrepreneurs who are considering venture, to just understand where that fits in the whole ecosystem. So thanks, Mariah.
Next question, Tracy.
First of all, hi sisters, hey startup friends. I haven't seen you guys in a long time. I'm so happy to see you. Mariah, are you funded up? Are y'all done? Are y'all raised? You ready to go?
We are on that trail right now. Every day I'm doing those LP calls,
You're only taking LP money?
Back calls.
Is it only LP money, or are you taking individual money as well?
Oh, so actually, that's another great question. So typically institutional funds, it's changed a little bit. Again, Cheryl and I were having a conversation about her. If you don't know, you talk to Cheryl about her background with Intel Capital and other venture capital. She has tons of experience and insight to share. But when you look at the LPs, institutional investors, and that would be like pension funds, to some extent, endowments, foundations, just the larger sources of funding, they don't write those, they don't want to manage small checks like that. They don't have time for that. I mean, you look at CalPERS and CalSTRS right here in our backyard, and they're some of the largest pension funds. They are the largest pension funds in the nation, and we're talking about hundreds of billions under management. So the minimum investment size for an LP like that is $100 million, and they don't want to be more than 10% of your fund. So you're looking at $1 billion fund, and we tend to be there. That's on the roadmap, but no. So our target is mostly accredited investors, people who make $200,000 a year or more, and have for the last 2 years, or make $300,000 as a household, and or who have over $1 million in net worth, excluding their primary residence, which is the same for most of you founders that are out there fundraising, and family offices and multifamily offices. So the LPs that I am talking to are mostly, they manage family offices.
And what's the minimum you want?
The minimum, just get all into, well, okay, since I'm doing a Reg D 506 C, which, probably some of you may be familiar with too as well, if you're out there fundraising, I guess this wouldn't be considered taboo, but the minimum for us is 100,000, and, there's room for that at my discretion, but I would tip, if it was under that, it would probably be for like a venture partner or something like that.
Miss you.
I miss you too, girl.
All right. Leslie, it's your turn to ask a question.
Yes, I have a global startup that I am looking for a CEO and COO for. It is a big, daunting task, and they need to be very mission aligned. It's in the social and environmental impact area, and needs to be the right people, and they definitely need to have the kind of chops to take something from zero to international, because by its very nature it starts as international. And I'm just wondering, I've employed a lot of different tactics, and I know it takes time, but just wondered if any of you have any ideas, any suggestions, anything like that. How to find these people.
Do they need to be local, Leslie?
No, they can be international. Like, I have interns working for me that are international. They're everywhere from South Africa to Finland to India. And that's the
I might have an idea for you. If you type your contact info in the chat, I'll jot it down and I can connect you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Am I missing anybody's hand? My co-hosts, you can help me if you see anybody's hand raised.
I'm not seeing anybody's hand raised, so I think.
There's something in the chat. Let's see.
Just a thank you and a bravo. I will say that. So if there are no other questions, I will say this. So I'm seeing some very positive comments in the chat for our presenters. So if you, as an attendee, got something out of this, just spread the word. Tell your friends about the value you got out of this collaboration between StartupSac and FourthWave and the Carlsen Center and Diversity Ventures, and let people know that these kinds of opportunities exist.